Good evening, and thank you for joining us to talk about the next couple of years that lie ahead for students who are currently in the first year. It's the start of a busy week. After the excitement of hearing me talk later on today, you've got the chance to listen in to some of my colleagues talking about their qualifications, their subjects, particularly those optional subjects that some of your children might be choosing, and also to ask questions. And I guess my advice for those sessions is that you really want to get a sense of whether your child belongs in, for example, GCSE music or GCSE geography or BTEC business or whatever it might be. So that lies ahead. My task over the next half an hour or so is to guide you through the process of choosing GCSEs and to think a little bit about what the next 2 years might look like. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is John Tuson. I'm the deputy head here at Bede. I've been here nearly as long as that photograph was taken, long ago as that photograph was taken. I've been here since, 1993 I started. So a long time before the students who we're talking about today were born. And it's my great privilege to be the deputy head here at Bede. And I guess the purpose of the next couple of days is a bit of a two-headed beast. On the one hand, we're looking ahead to the future, but we're also looking back at what's been achieved so far by these fantastic young people who are in our first year at the moment. And we as a school are deeply conscious of the fact that for these students, it hasn't been the year that we would have liked them to have had. It hasn't been the year that we'd planned for them. But I've also got to say that the way collectively that they've dealt with the difficulties of being in any school at this point in time, the collective way in which they've dealt with it has been fantastic. And so many young people in this year group have shown themselves to be resilient and strong and thoughtful and having a really wonderful sense of balance when it comes to looking at the difficulties that they face. So yes, looking back, but also looking forward and reflecting on what the future might be like for some of these brilliant young people that we're so privileged to be helping in their education at this moment. And I suppose now is a really exciting time for those students. We're at a bit of a point. It's a point where they can begin to discard some subjects that they haven't necessarily enjoyed, but also begin to look forward to the future and to starting to specialize in the subjects that they're really going to enjoy. And that sense of dropping some things, focusing on others is, I think, really quite exciting. And it's the chance to begin to think about what it is that you might want to do when you finish school. And at that point, it's really important, I think, to emphasize one key factor, which is this. Unfortunately, none of us can do everything. And it's one of the great strengths, but also possibly a weakness of the British education system, that the older you get, the more specialised you become. When I was younger, I desperately wanted to be a professional footballer. Unfortunately, I had no talent and no skill whatsoever, but that was what I really wanted to do. If I couldn't be a footballer, I really wanted to be a zookeeper. In fact, I did become a zookeeper. That's not a bad joke about being a teacher. I did become a zookeeper for a short while. While I was at Bede, I left Bede and went and worked in a zoo for a while. And of course, we've also got our zoo in the school. So perhaps I can carry on with that fantasy. So I wanted to be a footballer. I couldn't. I wanted to be a zookeeper. Probably couldn't. I wanted to be a male model, but alas, my talents probably didn't lie in that area either. So in the end, I had to settle on being a teacher. And I think that narrowing down is something that we all, to some extent, have to face up to. And there will be students who we're talking about tonight who will really struggle to drop some of the subjects that they enjoy. They enjoy everything and they want to do everything. And that's fantastic, but some things go by the wayside. And what's really important to emphasize is that just because you're not studying a subject for GCSE doesn't mean to say you're not going to have any involvement in that subject later on, in whatever context that might be. There are more ways to be involved with something and to take an interest in something other than just taking a GCSE in it. And I think it's really important at this stage. I want to refer to this chap. He's a former student. I used to teach him English, although English wasn't his area of specialism. Physics was his area of specialism. And on the screen right now, I've got his statement from the University of Florida in Tallahassee, where he is a professor doing work that I could simply never understand ever in a million years. One of the most brilliant young scientists of the UK. And yet, when he was here a few years ago, how many GCSEs did he do? 6. Only did 6 GCSEs. That was all he needed. Now, Rees was still is an exceptional young man. And he was absolutely focused, even at that young age, on what it was that he needed to do in order to become a physicist of the highest regard. But I mention him as the most extreme example I can think of someone who shows that having 27 GCSEs doesn't really benefit you. It's not necessary. I know that education isn't just about what's necessary, but you don't need the GCSEs to pile up like badges won by a Boy Scout. Instead, they're a means to an end. And as long as you've got those core ones, you're okay. Now, I'm talking away about GCSEs without pausing to reflect on the fact that some of you might not know what GCSEs actually are. For the vast majority of students, they are going to be 2-year courses. They're the things that students in year 9 are going to be focusing on through year 10 and year 11. And actually I would regard them as the building blocks on which future progress is going to be built. So they're very much the starting point in the British education system. And then from there, we move on to A-levels and then possibly onto university or higher education of some sort. But things have changed. And if you've got older children, this might be a bit different for you. A couple of years ago, new GCSEs came in. And so unlike was the case historically, we don't have coursework in the vast majority of GCSEs. Instead, they are linear courses that end with exams at the end of 2 years. And those exams lead to grades that are on a scale of 9 to 1. Now, of course, as I'm saying all this, current situation is somewhat different, and there won't be exams at the end of the year for our current year 11 upper 5th students. But assuming, as we have to, that by the time our students who are currently in year 9 find their way through the education system, by the time they're in the upper 5th or year 11 doing their exams, let's hope that things are back to normal and exams do happen as they're planned to happen. So most of those students will get a bunch of GCSEs that will be graded on a 9 to 1 scale. And this was brought in, the scale was brought in a few years ago, very, very good intentions, very, very good argument that to move away from the focus on a smaller rung of grades, A star and so on. And of course, immediately people start saying, well, what do these new grades equate to? So the attempt to move away from A star to E was perhaps sort of doomed, but nonetheless, there is a correlation between those grades. But it's a bit more complicated than that, because in some subjects we offer international GCSEs or IGCSEs, and some vocational courses as well, which are much more work focused. Let me just talk a little bit about IGCSEs. We do offer them in quite a few subjects, and perhaps you could regard these as an alternative GCSE course. People used to think they were harder, I think because they were done by a lot of the more prestigious more prestigious independent schools, so people assumed they were harder. I would say they're not harder at all. They're not necessarily any more rigorous, but they are recognised by universities. They've got the same weight. They're not going to be a disadvantage. And really, we would choose them where students we felt were going to have a better experience of their subject choosing that particular course. So, for example, one of the IGCSEs we do is my subject, English literature. And we've really just chosen it because we prefer the way that course is organised. We prefer the texts that students can study doing the IGCSE course as opposed to a conventional GCSE course. But in terms of what the students themselves will experience, and in terms of what they can say at the end of it when they're talking about their GCSE qualifications in whatever context that might be, really no great difference. And back in the day, this is from when, gosh, a couple of years ago, there was a bit of a scandal. And the suggestion was that somehow IGCSEs were a way to cheat the system. I look back, when this was a news headline, I look back with nostalgia to the days when such a story would have made the front pages of the newspapers. More exciting events going on now, perhaps. And again, I would say they're not a way to cheat. They don't get counted in league tables. They're not necessarily recognised in the same way by the Department for Education, but we like them as qualifications, and they do the job they need to do as GCSEs. And then we also offer a variety of vocational courses in business and ICT and sports science, or PE if you prefer, and also for some students as a science course. And those vocational qualifications, as you would expect, are a bit more hands-on. They are built through the 2-year course, through continuous assessment, which for some students is a bit better than having an exam at the end of 2 years. And those grades are different again. You would either get a distinction or a merit or a pass. For a number of our students, that's the right thing to do. So there's a whole cornucopia of different sorts of qualifications out there. And I'm going to say a bit more about that science BTEC course in a minute. So, crucial question, how should we choose our subjects? And obviously, it goes without saying that the number one criteria has to be, when a student is choosing their subjects, it has to be, do I enjoy this subject? Is it something I'm going to enjoy doing for the next 2 years? Am I good at it? Is it a subject where I think I can find success? I'd love to have done art as an O-level as they were in my days. But I'm rubbish at art. I've got no talent whatsoever. None. And so it would have been a foolish choice for me to have gone for. And the other thing is trying to get a balance in the program that we go for. We don't want to have all humanities subjects, for example. Getting a nice balance will be in there. And I would also say it's quite important, going back to the idea of GCSEs as building blocks, think of the next stage that those GCSEs are helping us build towards. So here at Bede's, and I think at most sixth form providers as well, for an A-level course, we are asking for students to reach a particular level. We'd expect at least 5 GCSEs at grade 6 or above. If you don't get that, there are options for you. It's our job to try and find the right option for you. But GCSEs represent that stepping stone to going on to a particular A-level course. And also, this is a factor that's worth bearing in mind, until a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, students applying for university would have taken AS levels halfway through their A-levels. So they'd be applying for university with grades already in the bag to show to those universities. Now, those don't exist anymore on the whole. So most of the students who are currently in year 9, when they come to apply to university, all they will have to show for themselves are their GCSE scores. And that is important, particularly if students are aspiring to some of those more academically prestigious universities. Having a good raft of GCSE results is really going to be important to them. And it'd be a bit like it was pre-2000. So if you yourself went through the British system, you know that your GCSE results or your O-level results, if you're like me, the wrong side of 50, counted when you applied for university. Just another thing, actually thinking of the future, is thinking about subjects. Now, obviously, there are some subjects that I probably need to be thinking about doing. If I want to go on and study geography at a higher level, clearly doing geography GCSE is going to be very, very important for me. But the other one, just to mention, is modern foreign languages, French, Spanish, German, Chinese are the 4 that we offer here. And there are some instances where those are going to be essential for university entry. Now, there's not many. In the UK system, there aren't many, maybe 1 or 2 courses that will require it. There are courses that would certainly expect you to have it, where it would look very, very good. But I've been helping a student over the past few weeks who's applying to Trinity College Dublin. And at Trinity College Dublin, they expect you to have a GCSE or the equivalent qualification in a modern foreign language. And the fact that my student didn't have one was a problem. It was an issue. We managed to get over the issue, but it was an issue. So there's no doubt that in some contexts, having that foreign language is going to be important. Now, and a final thing I would say in this section of the presentation, how should people choose their subjects? I would say that your role as a parent, if you are a parent watching this, your role is vital, absolutely vital. Now, your children are probably at the stage where they're starting to think that you know nothing and you are a moron who's got nothing to add to any conversation whatsoever. And it's absolutely right that they should think this. Children need to go through that thing of believing that their parents know nothing. But even when they're saying all of that, underneath they are listening to what you say. I've got no doubt of that. And the parental influence is vast. And our role as parents is to nudge and advise and cajole. We know our children better than anyone else does. But the one thing I would say is please don't forget that these are your children's GCSEs and not your GCSEs. And as a parent, I've got 4 children who've gone through this process. There are certain subjects I would love to have seen them doing. I'd love it if one of my children had done Latin as a GCSE, for example. I feel slightly resentful that I didn't have the opportunity to study it myself at school. And I'd love it if one of my children could make up for my shortcomings. And that's rather unfair on my children. It's them who'll have to do it, it's not me. And I think as parents, our influence is vast. Children will so often listen to their parents, even when they might profess to do anything but. Another really important thing I would suggest is that you should, as a parent, as a student choosing GCSEs, is that you should look at the results that have been achieved in GCSEs previously. And those are all findable very, very easily on our school website. All those results are there for the last couple of years. Don't hide those away. But I would say look at them intelligently. Recognize that results in of themselves don't tell you everything. And as anybody looking at those with an ounce of common sense can work out, just because the results are great in one subject doesn't necessarily mean that's the subject to do. It could be to do with the sorts of students who are choosing particular subjects. But nonetheless, I would say look at those results. They'll give you a picture, not the whole picture, but a picture. So what's the starting point? What is it that our children are all going to be doing over the next couple of years? Well, on the whole, we don't encourage people to take their GCSEs early, really. It's not necessarily a particularly helpful idea, and it leads to problems for some students. So all of our students will take English and maths. And for most of them, English will be 2 separate GCSE qualifications, English language and English literature. And for both English and maths as core subjects, 3.5 hours a week devoted to each of those subjects. The way it works is 3 hours one week for the next, but 3.5 hours a week. So obviously a big focus on making sure that English and maths are got right. And then there's science, another big whack of subject time. So for most students, there's going to be 6 hours a week dedicated to science, 2 for biology, 2 for chemistry, 2 for physics. For some of our students, those will be 3 separate GCSEs that end up with 3 separate GCSE grades. For some, it's going to be 2. You'll get a combined science score, where the results you achieve in your physics and your biology and your chemistry are merged together to give you 2 separate GCSEs. And that's a split that we'll make during the lower 5th year, when students have had a chance to show how much they enjoy science and what their level is at, and whether they want to go on and perhaps push themselves that bit harder to get the 3 separate GCSEs, or whether they're happy just to do the 2 as part of a double science course. And we also have, for some students, perhaps who don't find science particularly easy, we offer a single science course, which is a vocational BTEC course. So they can do BTEC science. And because that doesn't take up the whole 6 hours a week, alongside that, there'll be other options for them to take as well. So if your child is somebody who really struggles with science, over the space of the next week or 2, one of the science team will be in touch with you, or that might be a conversation you have on Thursday, to talk about whether actually that vocational science route might be the right one for them. So English, maths, science, as you'd expect, and then alongside that, the tutorials, the assemblies, the activities. I could put a page there from the activity booklet that we published this last weekend for activities that are kicking off over this week. Started yesterday on Monday, and some more today and on Thursday. So activities, crucial part of what's going on, all that sort of thing that you'd expect to be in there. Which then leaves us with 4 options. And that's the mission, perhaps, of the next couple of weeks, is for students to think through what those options might be and what they want to take. And for each of those optional courses, that's 2.5 hours a week in the timetable. So if I choose geography, over the space of a fortnight, I'm going to have 5 hours of geography lessons, plus my work I do out of class to help me be as brilliant a geographer as I can do. And of course, amongst all the subjects I can choose, there's all those old subjects that students have studied already, that they're familiar with. They know what geography is going to be like. They know what drama is. They probably know what PE is like. And if they do EAL or they have learning enhancement, they'll know about those. So there's all those old subjects, but there's also some new things that maybe they haven't come across before. Maybe they haven't had a chance to think about, but they did have a chance last week, actually, to do a couple of hours of business and economics. Maybe ceramics, might have done a little bit perhaps in the first year, but probably not. Maybe media, photography, there's sports science. These are all different areas that they perhaps can be contemplating and thinking about for the years that lie ahead. I just want to say just a brief word about modern foreign languages. I mentioned earlier the point that for some universities, particularly maybe if you're thinking wider afield in your future direction. But for some, you need to have that. But the value of having a modern foreign language GCSE, to my mind, cannot be overstated. I think it's hugely important. So although we don't make it a compulsory part of every student's selection of options, it's certainly something we would encourage students to really think very carefully about doing. And if students don't pick, if it's not right for a student to do a language, that's absolutely fine. But I would like it to be a thing that people had thought about and consciously made the decision not to do, rather than just running out of choices and not doing one. And for the record, and you're probably aware of this already, but it's possible for students to do Spanish, French, German or Chinese in the main timetable. But then if you're in the fortunate position where your children are able to have some basis in another language, Portuguese maybe, or Turkish or something like that, and Dutch we've had in the past as well, and you'd like them to have the opportunity to take those GCSEs in the school, that's possible. So for people who are essentially native speakers. So what are the other subjects that are available out there? I just want to quickly say a word or two about some of them. And there, to start us off with, is Mr. Hammond standing outside his ceramics studio. How many of our students are going to go on and do a job that involves the sort of thing they'll do in ceramics? Well, actually, surprisingly many, actually, quite a few. My favourite was a student from a few years ago who went and left us and ended up working at Madame Tussauds, making waxwork dummies of famous people. But yeah, you might not use it directly, but that creativity is going to be very much something that's going to be in demand, and you will not have a better experience than that which you'll have from Mr. Hammond down there. Dance, for some of our students, dance is absolutely at the centre of what they do. They're part of the Legat programme, takes up a bit of their time. But you can also do dance as a straight GCSE course if that's what you want to do. Certainly would recommend that. Drama, not law, don't do law as a GCSE, but drama certainly is a really popular subject, and it's a subject that's done brilliantly. And of course, the skills that brings with it, it should be done because it's a great thing to do. But beyond that, it's also a subject that has such a great practical use. There's Mr. Turner standing outside the art room. It's not the greatest of pictures, so rather than that, there's a piece of his work, or not his work, one of the students, is a piece of GCSE work from last year. The art school at Bede's in general, covering all those various subjects, is rightly lauded for the brilliance of what it does. I love this drawing here from a student last year, GCSE piece of work. Music is, again, it's wonderful. Some of the, it's such a tragedy that we haven't been able to see these concerts in the same way, although I hope you were able to enjoy the online cabaret concert at the end of last term. But some of the musical stuff that's produced here is stunning. And a lot of that will go back to students who begin by doing music as a GCSE. The media work that is produced also really, really extraordinary. Mr. Williams and his team. Business, one of our most popular GCSE courses in its various different formats, whether that's business studies or economics or the vocational business course. And design technology, a subject we're very proud to continue offering, very, very popular. And the reason this isn't the greatest of photographs with people's heads being cut off, but I particularly like it because it's got two girls doing it. And I think the idea that DT is where boys go and hit things with wood, absolutely outdated and long outdated. A subject that's to do with people who are interested in design and in pushing forward the barriers of what they can achieve. And that's absolutely not just about making things out of wood. All sorts of exciting stuff going on there. This isn't the gambling activity, photography. Again, going back to the brilliance of the art school at Bede. I mean, this is again a piece of GCSE work from last year, just stunning in the skill which is displayed there. And the photography courses are rightly massively popular and some great success. And then there's all the humanities courses, whether that's geography, history, religious studies. Again, all of those very, very popular. Latin. What I've been trying to push my students to do. There's our wonderful Latin teacher outside her classroom encouraging students in. So you've got your 4 choices there. Put those alongside you: English, maths, science, and most students are going to be doing somewhere between 8 and 10 GCSEs. It might be fewer, it might in some cases be even more. People might be sneaking in another course or two out of class, for example. But for most students, the vast majority of students, it's going to be somewhere between 8 and 10 subjects. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at the website we sent out, and hopefully you've booked some appointments for Thursday night. And just apologies for the fact that the booking system was a bit slower to get up than we'd hoped. It seems to all to be in order now. So you've had a chance to look at that. You've had a chance to hopefully look at the booklet that was a part of that. And soon, also on that website is going to appear a page that looks a bit like that. And on there, you'll have the opportunity to choose, your child will have the opportunity to choose what the subjects are that they want to do. And I thought it might be helpful to finish off by just looking at 2 or 3 sample students. And I've made these students up, they're not real people, but they're typical of the sorts of students that we're dealing with. I've named them after my favorite musicians. So the first student is Bruce. And he's a good all-rounder. He's pretty bright. He wants to have his options kept open as he goes forward. There's a picture of Bruce working hard on his woodwork, maybe. And what sort of things would somebody like Bruce end up doing? And I think if I were an all-rounder, the thing I want to go back to is that sense of balance. And if you look at the subjects that this fictional person has created, there's very much a sense of balance there. He's got a humanity, economics. He's got something creative, drama. He's got a language, German. In some ways, the most useful foreign language to learn. And he's got media in there. Some idiot possibly has said to Bruce, media, is that a real subject? And Bruce rightly has said, absolutely. It's really interesting stuff. It teaches you great practical skills. It teaches you how to read a text. And he's also seen some of the fantastic teaching that goes on in that department. So he's gone for media, and he's also selected his reserve. So reserve choices are good. So a nice balanced array of subjects. So Bruce's friend is Dolly, and Dolly is a ruthlessly ambitious academic. She wants to be a doctor. She wants to be something that's going to require a great deal of success. And there is Dolly looking very successful. And what sort of subjects might somebody in that position find themselves in? Well, the truth of the matter is, if you've got your English, maths, and your sciences, that's the core that you require. And the stuff that goes around it isn't perhaps to be worried about so much. But in Dolly's case, she's gone for music, academically, quite a tough subject to do. Again, a language is in there, a humanity, history, photography as a creative subject to sit alongside there. So again, balance. and something that looks like it's got a nice feel to it. It's not going to be pulling her in one direction all the time. My final sample student is Bob. Bob perhaps is quite a typical sort of a student, doesn't quite know what his future is, but he does have a sense of what he likes and doesn't like. What sort of things is Bob going to end up doing? That sort of student who perhaps isn't quite sure where he's going. Well, he's gone for business. He enjoyed the thing they did last week where they spent some time doing business, and business is a great, one of our most, I think actually our most popular optional subject. There's a reason for that. Brilliantly taught, interesting, relevant. He has a bit of learning enhancement. That takes up one of his GCSE choices. That's fine, not a problem. Design technology, something creative, something that's going to allow him to really express himself in that way. And religious studies, chance to argue, chance to think about issues, a chance to sit and reflect on who he is and what he's all about. I don't know if any of those sound like your children, but they might give you a sense of the way that some of those conversations might go. So coming up shortly, you've got these drop-in sessions. Use them. Find out as much as you can about those various subjects, but also talk to people, not necessarily now, but over the coming weeks. Miss Franks, who's in charge of careers and employability within the school, fantastically helpful. I want to be a chartered surveyor. What do I need? What GCSEs are going to help me? Might ask her. Mrs. Waterhouse, who's the Director of Studies for GCSE courses, so she is the year head for the next 2 years. Brilliantly helpful person, in the same way that Mr. Backler, I hope, has been a brilliantly helpful person this year. I've got to say, those two, Mr. Backler and Mrs. Waterhouse, you could not ask for more helpful, reliable people to have alongside you. They're people I'd want alongside me in the crisis for sure. And I'm there to help as, sorry, wrong photograph has snuck in. I'm there to help as well, and please don't hesitate to ask me for my input or my advice, even if I've got lockdown hair, as I did when that photograph was taken. Talk to these people too. These are I think most of the first year tutors I managed to get in here. They're going to be really important. Hopefully you've got slots to see them on Thursday, and they've got that nice overview of who your children are and what they might be doing. But talk to these people as well. I don't mean go and find some random first year student and start asking them what your son or daughter should be doing, but talk to your children, listen to them and what their thoughts are. Second, most of their thoughts are going to be really good. And really, of course, there's going to be the occasional thing, the idea of I didn't want to do that subject because my friend's doing it, which isn't necessarily the right way to choose a subject. But the views that those students have are crucial and fundamental because they're the ones who are going to be doing it. And I'd also say, trust us, trust the school. I realize I've got this picture because this is when, in the Jungle Book, when the song Trust in Me is being sung. But I realized as I was doing this, I realized the irony of the fact, because actually you shouldn't trust this. The snake's trying to eat him. So maybe he shouldn't have been trusted. We're not trying to eat your children, I emphasize at this point. But do trust us when we talk about the sorts of programs that might work for your children. So we ask for options to be completed when we come back after half term, hopefully in the flesh, we'll be coming back. And after that, we begin to put timetables together for next year. But if changes need to be made, we'll try and accommodate those changes. We want it to be right for the students concerned. I just want to pause at that point, and if I may, I want to just change the focus a little bit. I want to talk a bit about what it's like to have children at this stage. I've been teaching for 100 years, and so I've seen a lot of first year students come and go and move on to be lower fifth students and eventually turn out to be pleasant young adults. And it's hard. It's hard raising children. It's hard as parents. If you're a parent or a guardian listening to this at the moment, you've got the hardest job that you can possibly have, and also the most important job. And at the moment, it's particularly hard. It's not an easy time for any of us at the moment. It's not an easy time for us as parents or as adults, not necessarily an easy time for children either. And the idea that there is some perfect family where everything works really, really well, where the children never get it wrong, and the children are always delightful, those families don't exist. Absolutely they don't exist. And the idea that there are perfect children out there, sorry to these guys, I'm sure they're delightful, but none of them is perfect. And I think it's really important that we recognize that fact. We recognize that just as no children are perfect, just as we as parents are not perfect, and that's fine. It's absolutely fine. And it's okay to get it wrong from time to time. And as we think about our children at the moment, we're at that stage where those childish things are being pushed away. From the film Inside Out, great film, and about that stepping into adulthood, the childish things being pushed into the dump. And that's hard as parents. That's hard. And it's hard as our children who were once so delightful and lovely and thought that we were wonderful. They thought we were hilarious. Now they think we're sad and ignorant and we've got nothing to contribute, possibly. And that our children were turned into these disgusting beasts. And in non-lockdown times, possibly, their idea of a night out with their friends might be somewhat different to what it was a while ago. And it's hard as parents. It's hard dealing with children as they're beginning to get older and as they're beginning to grow up and turn into young adults. But this is the most important slide I'm going to show you this evening. You probably won't know these students, but these are students who are now in our upper sixth year, 17, 18 years old, getting ready to go off and face the world. And as I was putting this together, I was going through the list of students in the upper sixth, and I could have picked pretty much anyone from that year group because they are civilized and charming. They're successful, whatever successful might mean, but they are young adults who are absolutely on the road to good and fulfilling lives in all sorts of different ways. And believe you me, that wasn't necessarily something that you would have taken as a gimme 5 years ago, 4 years ago, when they were in the first year. A lot of these people are people who have gone through all sorts of ups and downs, who've got it wrong, because that's part of their job as 14-year-olds, is to get it wrong. But by the time they start getting towards 17, 18, things are settling down, and they develop into the most fantastic young people. And if your child is perhaps going through that stage of starting to be a little bit difficult, bear with it. Don't be too hard on them. Don't be too hard on yourself. It will get better. So I say good luck with the job of looking after 13 and 14-year-old children, but more specifically, good luck with the job of helping them choose their GCSEs. I really hope that's been helpful. I really hope you're going to enjoy the chance to go and meet some of my colleagues. And I very much look forward to seeing you, hopefully in the flesh, hopefully as we get back to some degree of normality over the coming 6 months. Thank you very much indeed.